dawn of freedom once more shone around our glorious isle. The sacred cause for which they died still lingers in.
That night they took us out one by one to shoot us. I was lashed out in Ewa, and they took me into a room where there was 8 or 9 coffins. And they told me the other fellows were inside in the coffins. When they started firing us, with revolvers, there was bullets hopping in all directions.
Times, Ireland, Mother Ireland, you bore a bitter loss when you lost a true and faithful.
A fellow called us Irish bastards, and he was an Irishman himself. But another fellow, one of our lads, asked to be left to say his prayers. He said, no prayers. He said, yeah, our fellas didn't get any time for prayers. And he says, maybe some of you might go to heaven. He said, you might meet our fellas there. And they tied us in, our hands behind our back, and left about a foot between the hands, like, and the next fella. And they tied us in a circle in around the mine. And they tied our legs in, and the knees as well with a rope. And then they took off our caps and they said we could be praying away now as long as we like. So the next fellow to me said his prayers and I said mine too. But I still kept watching where they went, like. It was that saved me afterwards. But he said goodbye then, and I said goodbye, and the next fella picked it up and he said goodbye, goodbye lads, and up it went. And I went up with it, of course.
Faithful sons at Ballyseedy Cross. It was on a cold spring morning in the second reign of Tan, a true noble Kerry men fell by their wicked hands, and how they beat their prisoners more cruel than an ass, before they took their human lives at Ballyseedy Cross. And how Steve Fuller's life was saved, no one but God can tell.
And he's represented today by Dan Buckley, who travelled all the way from Brisbane to be with us here today. Volunteer Tim Toomey, Gotclahi Kilflane, and he's represented here today by Con Toomey, his grandmother. So thank you all for your attention, and I'll hand you back now to Tony Bergen. Thank you.
Thank you, Jimmy, and thank you very much to all the relatives who have taken the time to be here today for this memorial. I now would like to introduce Owen O'Shea. Owen is a local historian and author, and who also organised a conference here last weekend on the Kerry Civil War, which was a fantastic event. So, Owen, if you wouldn't mind coming and maybe sharing some information on the Ballyseedy.
Good afternoon, distinguished guests, and particularly the relatives of and the descendants of those who died here at Ballyseedy. Ballyseedy has been forever synonymous with the worst excesses of the barbarity and brutality of the Irish Civil War and the depths to which the conflict had descended by the spring of 1923. What happened here a century ago next Tuesday leaves a lasting scar on Irish history and the county of Kerry. Much has been said and written about Ballyseedy, particularly in recent weeks and months. But as often as I engage as a historian with the subject matter, I never cease to be shocked by the details of what occurred. No matter how many times you read the accounts of what happened here, you cannot but be shaken to your core. We all hope that those bitternesses are beginning to abate in this centenary year, and that the pain of the civil war in Kerry is continuing to lessen, so that suffering can give way to respectful remembrance and reflection. May all those who died in the civil war in Kerry rest in peace. Aramagov.
Thank you very much, Owen. And now I would like to call for some prayer and reflection. I'd like to ask the Most Reverend Dr. Ray Brown, Bishop of Kerry, and following Dr. Brown, we'll have the Right Reverend Michael A.S. Burrows, who's the Lord Bishop of Limerick, Killaloe and Ardfert. So, Bishop Ray.
I will read a poem and then a prayer that we all know so well, and finally then a psalm which looks towards those who have died, and a prayer for the dead. And then Bishop Michael will say a few words and lead into the...
So in those prayers we recall not just the victims of what happened in the immediate sense, but also through the years their suffering families whose treatment has been described. And as we think of the awfulness of obsession with reprisal, which has so often bedeviled Irish history, we pray for delivery in our own hearts even still from the reprisal instinct, even if it is not something expressed through blood, it still lingers in the heart. And so may we take to heart the courage of those who do not bear a grudge.
Thank you, Bishop Ray and Bishop Michael. I would now like to call upon Jimmy Deenahan and Kathleen Hartnett to lay a wreath here at the memorial. Thank you, Jimmy, and thank you, Kathleen. I'd like to thank everyone who participated here today of their time in such an important event.
Many's mournful tear he cried as along this road he passed, to have seen the blood of his comrades pour at how he bade his comrades that fond and last farewell.
There will be an event to mark the Drumbo executions, and in particular to Tim Sullivan and Dan Enright, after whom the Listowel Common is named, to remember those. That's at 7 a.m. on the 14th of March. Thomas Harrigan was also asking me to remember Clashmalkin event will be on the 16th of April also. Now the historical reenactment will commence just...
Warm heart. What's today? Easy? Judge yours? Yeah, that's right. Tipping along. As you all know. I like it. Pretty trendy. Here now. How are you? That's at all. Hello. Pleasure's mine. How are you? It's so nice to meet you. How are you? Thank you.
That the official account of what happened 100 years ago on Tuesday is as false as the Witchery Tribunal report. Respect to all of those who heard those who had the neck to say that we shouldn't have a commemoration or ask for justice for executed prisoners, 8 who were executed today and 41 in total in Kerry during the Civil War. But those people persevered and the truth will out. It took the Bloody Sunday families 50 years. It has taken us 100 years so far, but we will prevail. Remember them here today. George O'Shea and Timothy Toomey from Kilflynn, Michael O'Connell and John Daly from Castleisland, James Welsh from the Spa, Tralee, Patrick Buckley from Scart, John O'Connor, originally from Innishannon, County Cork, and then Liverpool, Patrick Harton from Listowel, and Stephen Fuller, who survived. And we will have 3 wreaths laid here today. First of all, I would call on Mary Lou MacDonald, President of Sinn Féin, to lay a wreath on behalf of Houlihan, whose mother was in Commemorations, and an old friend of mine and of us in Sinn Féin, to lay a wreath on behalf of Commemorations. And last but certainly not least, I'd ask John O'Shea, who is the nephew of George O'Shea, who was killed at Ballyseedy here, to lay a wreath on behalf of the families. John was great assistance to us in preparing the booklet for today and gave us invaluable knowledge into the trauma that affected his family at the time.
Good afternoon, everyone. I suppose I can't help but reflect on the symmetry of being here to speak to you today, because on the 5th of September 1959, my grandfather, John Bill McElligott, was present to see his friend and old IRA comrade, John Joe Sheehy, unveil this very memorial. And half a century ago, my father joined the crowds here to mark the 50th anniversary of this event. So, of course, today we come here to commemorate the centenary of some of the darkest moments in our modern history. A series of atrocities that ended up defining the Irish Civil War and ensuring its bitter legacy remained shadowing Irish society for decades after. Victims like Joseph O'Brien, the sole survivor of Knocknagoshel, whose mangled legs had to be amputated. His wife would spend years begging the army authorities for enough money to allow him afford the simple dignity of a wheelchair. Victims like Molly O'Shea from my village of Kilflynn, who suffered a complete mental breakdown over the death of her adoring brother George here at Ballyseedy. She died an invalid, aged just 39. Victims like Mary Harnett, so traumatised by her son Patrick's killing here that she, quote, didn't speak 10 words in 12 months, and she would die in silent anguish in April 1924. So when looking to both learn and move on from this troubling legacy, I think it's appropriate to end by stressing the lessons taken by the generation who suffered through these traumatic times. Stephen Fuller's family recalls him coming to some peace about what had been done to him. And as a father, he constantly preached a creed of conciliation to his children, extolling the necessity of letting go any feelings of hatred or revenge. Meanwhile, 64 years ago, John Joe Sheehy stood on this very spot and pleaded for this monument to be seen as an example of, quote, how we forgive but we don't forget the legacy and events of the Civil War. Today that sentiment seems more appropriate than ever. Gurv Mohammed.
And I should have acknowledged earlier on the presence of not just John O'Shea, but members of the Harton family and some of the other families also present here today. Now I'm going to invite Moss Hannon and Willie Kelly to sing the ballad of Ballyseedy.
The dawn of freedom once more shone throughout our gloomy isle. The sacred cause for which they died still lingers in our minds. Ireland, mother Ireland, you bore a little loss. You lost it to and noble sons at Ballyseedy Cross.
Friday night came into Saturday morning. We lost a beloved and valued comrade who had been active in our movement for 60 years. Her name was Rita O'Hare. To dedicate my remarks to the memory of the irrepressible and irreplaceable Rita O'Hare. The monument that we gather before is a poignant memorial to the 8 men who had their lives so brutally taken from them 100 years ago. It's also a striking testament to the noble principles and ideals of those people who, with everything they held dear, drove the revolution and the struggle for a free and independent Ireland. Here in the Kingdom of Kerry, a new day is breaking on the horizon, and a new united Ireland comes within our view. It's now within touching distance, and we are closer than ever before. And my friends, with one last push, with one final effort, with determination and loyalty, we will reach that republic in our time, and when we do, we will meet again at Ballyseedy.
Tralee! I said don't leave me, for God's sake.
Many's a mournful tear he cried as along this road he passed, to have seen the blood of his comrades pour at Ballyseedy Cross. May God receive their guiltless souls, for them we humbly pray. Pat Hartnett, Buckley, Daly, Welch, young Toomey and O'Shea, O'Connor and O'Connell, 8 men dead on this ground. They lost their lives that dreadful morn at Ballyseedy Cross.
Tara Ballyseedy. On behalf of the Ballyseedy Memorial Committee and Trustees and Republican Sinn Féin, we welcome you all here today. Today, we commemorate the 100th anniversary of 8 volunteers of the Irish Republican Army murdered by pro-British Free State forces on the night of March 6, 1923. 9 Republican prisoners were selected in Ballymullen Barracks, Tralee, by Dave Nelligan, a Free State Army intelligence officer with the Dublin Guard. Acting on orders from Paddy Daly, the Free State officer commanding, the 9 prisoners, Pat Buckley, John Daly, Pat Hopnett, Michael O'Connell, John O'Connor, George O'Shea, Timmy Toomey, James Walsh and Stephen Fuller were driven here in a lorry, shackled in chains, tied to a barricade which contained a landmine constructed in Ballymullen Barracks. The mine was detonated and a number of hand grenades thrown at some of the men that were barely alive at this stage. They opened fire on them with a heavy machine gun. Stephen Fuller, blown clear when the mine detonated, lived to tell the story of the horrific ordeal and expose the attempted cover-up by the Free State of the murder of his 8 comrades. We also remember today the men of Countess Bridge Killarney and the Bahas Castleisland, who died in similar circumstances, murdered by the Free State while being held as prisoners of war. This iconic monument stands as a reminder of the defiance of Irish Republicans over the betrayal and continued support for partition and British rule in the occupied 6 counties of North East Ireland. Republican leader Dean Mellows, executed by the Free State just over 100 years ago, said in one of his last sessions of the All-Ireland Parliament Dáil Éireann in 1922, and I quote, "It is a fallacy to believe that a republic of any kind can be won through the shackled Free State. You can't make a silk purse out of a sow's ear. The Free State is British created and serves British imperial interests. It is the buffer erected between British capitalism and the Irish Republic." The original Ballyseedy Memorial Committee, namely John Joe Sheehy, Sean Godley, Sean H. Ryan, James O'Loughlin, Michael Lynch and William Walsh, achieved great success in raising funds to build this monument. Funds were collected at home and throughout the world, in Australia and England, and in the US with the help of George Harrison, Mick Flannery and Tom Falvey, a native of Kerry. The architect was former internee of the Curragh concentration camp, Unseen MacEwan, and the sculptor Jan Renard Goulet, a Britain nationalist. We also remember the other trustees of this monument who are no longer with us: Sean Savage, Matthew O'Duda, Michael O'Brien and John Godley. We will now have the laying of the wreaths, and in memory of all those who have died for Ireland, Dan Broder, veteran Republican Ballymacalligan, will lay the wreaths.
That's good. Thank you.
Sir Nadine for Boston Show, Kilbina Hin, Jeremy Crone and Cronville, Arnahar, Atharnav, Gane for Tannen, the Davidariat, Gane the $100 for the Enternav.
The Stewart 6th Battalion and Ballylongford 8th Battalion. Tom Lean, Edward Carmody, Patrick Dalton, Michael Gallivan, Patrick Hatnett, John Lawler, John Linan, Jeremiah Lyons, Michael Bob McKelligot, Daniel Scanlon, John Sheehan, Patrick Walsh, Castleisland 7th Battalion, Michael Brosnan, Patrick Buckley, John Daly, Thomas Fleming, Patrick Kinney, Bertie Murphy, Daniel Murphy, Michael O'Connell, Dennis O'Connor, Jeremiah O'Leary, John Prendeville, John Savage, Richard Shanahan, James Walsh, Ballymackelliget, part of the 7th Battalion, James Bailey, Dennis Broderick, Michael Brosnan, John Brown, Robert Brown, John Flynn, Patrick Hallahay, Richard Lade, John Lean, John McMahon, John Reedy, Morris Reedy. Died elsewhere: Thomas Ash, Charlie Daly, Daniel Enright, Timothy O'Sullivan, Patrick Forden, Charles Hanlon, James Hickey, Charlie Cairns, Michael Mulvihill, Diora Haley, Thomas Russell, Patrick Shortis, Austin Stack, and William Conway O'Connor. Gwnenedi y trocre na leicre seo galéir agus na leicre eile for Boston Association of Hen.
Today we send our greetings and best wishes to Irish Republican prisoners in KAHS throughout Ireland, in Portlaoise, Maghaberry and Hyde Bank prisons. I now ask Siobhan Walsh to read the proclamation of the All-Ireland Republic.
Poblacht na hÉireann, the Provisional Government of the Irish Republic, to the people of Ireland. Irish men and Irish women, in the name of God and of the dead generations from which she receives her old tradition of nationhood, Ireland, through us, summons her children to her flag and strikes for her freedom.
Now we come to our main oration. Our speaker has come to this county many times, speaking occasions, attending commemorations, and has attended here many times over the years. He's a member of Galway County Council and our Corla member of Republican Sinn Féin. Please welcome from County Galway, Tomás Ó Corráin.
Gramagad a Chairlach. Dús bhhailm fáilte a chuir ru gachganna an seo son Sinn Féin poblachtach a neamh. As bhhailm bíochas a bháil fisin leis a goiste chun na chan seo an inad starúil bránach atá an seáin a gunda chéirí. Ceann na condachaí tí má go túscart na hÉireann is náisiúntach sa tír seo. Drama has an fód faoi na drochléontaí ó 1798 an nuas go dtí lá atá neamháin. A réid le dóchrán is na feithidí agus an sin ar an trúbal Jacob leis an tírstáid. In my view, the most Republican county in Ireland and the most county that has suffered most, probably with the exception of the 6 northeastern counties that is still occupied by the British Crown. As Kerry did suffer. I suppose we were the first occupied by the Brits. The great empire that the sun never went down on. But it's easy for it to go down on it now, all they have left to it. Because they've nothing left. Only the Falklands and Gibraltar, Ireland, Scotland, Wales, and of course, the Isle of Man, and I cannot forget our old Celtic friends, the Cornish, down there in the southeast coast of England, who don't recognise themselves as English. Whatever chance we have of being free, they'll never be free. The British, they conquered the world. They ruled every country in the world. America, Canada, all the supernations today. But it pays for those superpowers to be together and to keep air bases and things like that so that they can fly from A to B, such as the Arabic countries. I won't get into it much. Arabic countries, they were divided by the British as well, divided by religion, when it's not a war of religion, it's a war of occupation. On public the boo.
Tom Curran. And that's, folks, we've come to the end of this commemoration. So on behalf of the Ballyseedy Memorial Committee and Trustees and Republican Sinn Féin, I thank you all for attending here today. And now I call in the piper to play our own Nadine.
Their lives that dreadful morn at Ballyseedy Cross. Sleep.
We have not yet finished our journey towards getting rid of the British. Can we have the raising the national flag now? The tricolour will be raised by Mr. Jimmy O'Connell of Castleisland. Mr. O'Connell is a nephew of volunteer Michael O'Connell, who was killed here at Ballyseedy 100 years ago. Now we'll have the roll of honour. Will be read by Eamon Hartnett, a grandnephew of Captain Pat Hartnett. Eamon carried with him the rifle that Pat Hartnett used in the fight for freedom.
Captain Pat Hartnett, Finude Company, 6th Battalion. Captain Jim Walsh, Churchill Company, 9th Battalion. Captain George O'Shea, Kilflin Company, 2nd Battalion. Volunteer Tim Toomey, Kilflin Company, 2nd Battalion. Of the Kerry No. 1 Brigade, many of whose relatives are here today. Remarkable.
Now we'll have the laying of the wreaths. On behalf of the family of John O'Connor, his grandson, Aidan Larkin. Some member on behalf of the family of Michael O'Connell. Make room for the colour party to come through there, please. Can the people who are laying the wreaths for the following members please come over here? Michael O'Connell, John Daly, Pat Hartnett, Tim Toomey, George O'Shea and Stephen Fuller. Can you come and assemble over here, please? Matt Lean, one of the trustees of the monument here. Emma Colbert, National Graves. Now we'll have a poem, Mishaera. Mishaera is a poem written by Padraig Pearse in 1912. The verses describe Ireland as an old woman whose glorious days have passed and who has been sold by her children. The words resonate with the events we commemorate today. The poem will be read by Mr. Tommy McCartney of Tyrone. Tommy's brother Padraig was killed in Loughgall with 8 Republican soldiers when 8 Republican soldiers gave their lives for Ireland's freedom. A similar number to what we commemorate here today. Tommy.
Mishaera, Shiname, Nan Kayak Bera, Mór Maglor, Me Arog Hu Holland Kroga, Mór Manire, Chan Fian a Yale Lavahar, Mór Mafian, the knowledge to my here Chiappa, Mór Mavron, Deag and Dam in our Horish Dogish, Mishaera, Egni Me and Kayak Bera.
We'll now have a statement on behalf of the Ballyseedy Memorial Committee. Will be read by John Rice, son of George Rice, grandson of John Joe Rice, commanding officer of Kerry No. 2 Brigade, please.
On behalf of my father, George Rice, and the committee here for the memorial, I'd like to welcome you all to our monument, which stands to commemorate those who died at a massacre here 100 years ago. 70 years ago, this spot was only marked by a white cross that stood at the roadside to remember the spot where 8 brave men were killed for their loyalty and their dream of an Irish Republic. With the passage of time and the changing generations, it was feared that what happened here would be forgotten. So in the 1950s, a committee was formed under the chairmanship of the great John Joe Sheehy, Kerry football and Republican, and other members of this committee, many who played their own role in the fight for Irish freedom.
Which will be read by Mr. Sean Whelan, Chairman of the National Graves.
First of all, I must say that it's an honour for us with the National Graves Association to be invited by the Memorial Committee here to co-host today's centenary commemoration. It's a great honour indeed. It's also an honour for me personally and other members of my family here to be involved with such a commemoration in Kerry on the centenary of the massacre in Ballyseedy. One of our own family members, Colin and Charlie Dawley from Fieries, was executed in Donegal, and his anniversary is just in, centenary anniversary is just in 9 days' time. So it's a great honour both for us, member of the National Graves Association, and personally to be asked here today. If you see our colour party on the nearest flag to us carries the initials IR. That's because Liam Lynch issued orders during the Civil War that all battalion areas of the Republic should fly that flag, as the national flag was being abused by the Free State forces. So the National Graves Association decided that for all Civil War commemorations, that flag will be included in the colour party. Also, you see the third flag from the far end, Philomena is carrying the Come on the Mon flag. Before I finish, I must emphasise that the National Graves Association has no affiliation whatsoever to any political party or organisation. When the association was refounded in 1926, they put some rules together that we've adopted to this day. The association doesn't accept monies or donations from any political parties or organisations and our government.
My appreciation to members of the Brick family who are there, and they're the custodians of this piece of metal. This is part of the landmine that was manufactured in Ballymullen Barracks to kill 8 Irish patriots across the road. This is the only surviving piece, and we are grateful that they've allowed us to see it here today. Gormagwiv.
Now, Father Gerard Welsh, our parish priest in Ballymacarrick, his granduncle, volunteer James Welsh of Corra, was killed by Free State forces in Mount Valvey in Castleisland on 27th of March 1923. Father Gerard, the greatest gentleman that ever came into the parish.
We'll say a decade of the Rosary for all who were massacred here and for all who suffered and all who've gone before us. In the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, Amen. The first glorious mystery of the resurrection. Orna herit or nav gonai for thine imgadag the riot, gnenta the $100 money at the nav.
We'll now hear the oration by Dr. Tim Horrigan, and this man is the backbone of this committee, and you know, anytime we'll pass this monument, he's here scrubbing or painting. I think every time he ever wrote the wife, he comes back here.
And so it began in 1916 with these immortal words: Irish men and Irish women, in the name of God and the dead generations from which she receives her old tradition of nationhood, Ireland, through us, summons her children to her flag and strikes for her freedom. Ireland did summon her children to her flag, and her sons did strike for her freedom. Many young men from County Kerry would answer that summons. They would see their comrades fall at Lispole, at Headford, at Gortaglana, but on they fought. They would take what England would not give. They would succeed where heroic generations before them had failed. They would drive the forces of the Crown from our county, but alas, alas, not from Ireland. The Republic of Pearse and Connolly was not to be. Ireland would be ruled not by Britain, but for Britain. The famous British General Bernard Montgomery, writing at the time to a fellow officer, stated that he agreed with Lloyd George when he signed the treaty. The British Army, Montgomery suggested, would in time have defeated the Republicans, but the rebellion would only have broken out again. He said it was better to give the Irish a degree of self-rule. They would do to each other what the British could not do to them. After 800 years, the English knew the Irish well. They knew who could be bought and who could be bribed, who could be flattered and who could be fooled. Pragmatism would replace principle. An oath to the Crown would replace an oath to the Republic. A new subservient state would replace our proud nation. Weak hands would tumble what great men had built. But there were always those who would not betray, those who could not be bullied or bribed, men who had no price, men who had declared for a republic and would live under no other law. In Kerry, such men were the many and not the few. The 8 men who died here were of their people, were of our people, a people who had been dispossessed and displaced, who had been massacred and murdered, who had been starved and exiled. Great men had fought in Kerry's ditches and bogs, mountains and villages, so that British rule in our land would be no more. They had been outgunned, but not outfought. They had buried comrades and seen the suffering inflicted on their people. But their rifles had done what generations of rebel pikes and muskets, insurgent spears and swords had failed to do. They drove the British from County Kerry. They brought you your liberty, but alas, not Ireland its freedom. The task was unfinished. For that liberty they would fight on. The men of Kerry would not be separated from the old cause, except in death, and death did come here at Ballyseedy Cross. In 1963, John F. Kennedy declared, "A nation reveals itself not only by the men it produces, but also by the men it honours, the men it remembers." We are gathered here today to honour, to remember 8 such great men, for it is such as their ideas and sacrifice that defines what the Irish nation is and what the Irish state should be. They died terrible deaths, faithful to the cause of Ireland's freedom and loyal to that cause alone. In 1922, such fidelity had become a crime against the new state, and so these 8 men would follow the well-trod patriots' path to death here at Ballyseedy Cross. The greatest honour any community can bestow is that of remembrance. The lives of the dead are placed in the memory of us, the living. It is fitting that we gather here today, not beneath political banners, nor to utter hollow political slogans, not to garner votes or increase our profile, but we assemble here today as a community, a people remembering their own. We have gathered not because we were summoned, but because we should, because it is our duty, because it is our small repayment of a large debt we owe to these 8 brave men who paid for our liberty with their lives. To ignore might be convenient to some, but to forget would be to betray. We are proud to remember, for we, the men and women of Kerry, are descendants of a people who rose, were felled, but rose again and again, descended from generations who were slaughtered, dispossessed, starved, evicted and exiled. We are of a people who refuse to yield, who refuse to bow. We will not be told who to commemorate and who to forget. We will remember those 8 true men whom Ireland had summoned to her flag to strike for her freedom. We remember those who fell at Ballyseedy Cross. The wise men have told us what happened at Ballyseedy is best forgotten. It is not something for modern Ireland to remember. History, like religion, is being pushed from the classroom. The wise men have decreed there is now little need for either. Ireland is told what is to be remembered and what is to be forgotten, what is to be commemorated and what is to be ignored. All must rhyme with present-day political requirements. But the history of Ireland is not theirs to rewrite, not theirs to revise, not theirs to define. 70 years ago, Ballyseedy had been nudged from the agreed narrative that was beginning to pass as history. But those true to the old cause rallied to the memory of their fallen comrades. Pence, pounds and dollars were collected. The ordinary people had not forsaken. The exiles still remembered. Bronze was fashioned. Stone was inscribed. This monument would stand lest any would forget. When it was unveiled, Cort Larkin, daughter of John O'Connor, who died here, would write, "I cannot begin to tell you how grateful I feel for getting this monument erected and my father's memory dug up from the oblivion to which it had been consigned." We are told by historians and politicians that one side in the Civil War was as bad as the other, that dreadful things were done on both sides. That is a lazy and dishonest conclusion. As a human, I know there is no hierarchy of grief. As a Christian, I cannot but regret the loss of every life. As an Irishman, I am embarrassed that we allowed ourselves to be divided by our colonial masters. However, In our county here, this county of Kerry, there was not an equivalence between those who fought to defend the Republic and those who would destroy it. There was a difference between those who were tied to a landmine here and those who detonated it. There was a difference between those who faced the firing squads at Ballymullen Jail and those who fired the deadly volleys. There was a difference between Kerry's tortured prisoners and their tormentors. There was a difference between the edicts of Bishop O'Sullivan and the laws of God. 100 years later, history has cast its judgment. It is those that suffered the most that are remembered, and those that inflicted the most who are forgotten. And so it should be. A century has passed, but their memory has endured. Today we can gather here, not in anger, not even in sorrow, but in pride. Proud to commemorate these 8 young soldiers who sought freedom for all of Ireland. A freedom unfettered by foreign interference. A freedom for all Irish people, so that they, and they alone, can decide our nation's destiny. The victims of each war are counted by numbering the dead, but those that suffered the most and the longest are those that were left behind to mourn. They are never recalled. Their lifelong suffering is forgotten, their loss unending. As a grateful state moved on, to forget became convenient, to remember subversive. Many who benefited from Civil War politics would find it easy to sleep on other men's wounds. But for those bereaved, there would be no rest. John O'Connor would leave a wife and 2 young children. Patrick Buckley, a widow to rear their 5 children. All the Ballyseedy victims had mothers and fathers, brothers and sisters, nieces and nephews, comrades and friends. While 10,000 tears would be shed at funerals at Tralee, Kilflin, Lixna and Castleisland, for the 8 families, the silent mourning would last a lifetime. To those left behind to grieve the longest, our nation's debt should be the greatest, for they too have paid the price for our freedom. All we can offer is our gratitude and remembrance, small acknowledgements of great sacrifices. That dreadful conflict cost so many Irish lives. It was a needless war that divided and beggared us, but for its British architects, that was what it was supposed to do. It is called the Irish Civil War, but the name is not quite accurate. In essence, it was Britain's Civil War, for Britain instigated it. It was fought with British weapons, and Britain benefited from it. We should have been oblivious to the differences fostered by an alien power, but we were not. We are not. In the words of the patriot priest, Father Michael O'Flanagan, they had fooled us again. Perhaps one day we will learn the lessons from our troubled history, and righteous men and women will make our land a nation once again. W.B. Yeats would say of the heroes of 1916, we know their dream, enough to know they dreamed and are dead. We say of the heroes of Ballyseedy Cross, we too know their dream, enough to know they dreamed and are dead. Today we remember, Kerry remembers, and let Ireland remember its noble sons who died at Ballyseedy Cross. Gormagwith.
Song Ballyseedy Cross, sung by Mary Lean, accompanied by Adrian McSweeney, and the arrangements are by Noel Barrett.
shone around our glorious isle. The sacred cause for which they died still lingers in our times. Ireland, Mother Ireland, you bore a bitter loss when you lost 8 true and faithful sons at Ballyseedy Cross. It was on a cold spring morning in the second reign of Tan. 8 true noble Kerry men fell by their wicked hands, and how they beat their prisoners more cruel than an ass. Before they took their human lives at Ballyseedy Cross. And how Steve Fuller's life was saved, no one but God can tell. And how he bade his comrades that fond and last farewell. Many's mournful tear he cried as along this road he passed, to have seen the blood of his comrades pour at Ballyseedy Cross. May God receive their guiltless souls, for them we humbly pray. Pat Hartnett, Buckley, Daly, Welch, young Toomey and O'Shea, O'Connor and O'Connell, 8 men dead on this ground. They lost their lives that dreadful morn at Ballyseedy Cross. Sleep on, brave Kerry men, all in your scattered graves. From Countess Bridge, Killarney, to Clashmeelkin's lonely graves, you gave your lives for Ireland. We never will forget. On this bloody road of Easter week at Ballyseedy Cross.
Before you go, there will be a commemoration at KAHS, Castleisland at 3 o'clock next Sunday. Thank you.
Sleep on, brave Kerry men, all in your scattered graves. From Countess Bridge, Killarney, to Clashmealkin's lonely graves, you gave your lives for Ireland. We never will forget. On this bloody road of Easter week at Ballyseedy Cross.